Zevu was 16 and living in Camalanga, in a house that never felt like home. His father carried his pride like a shield, and hardly ever spoke to him unless it was to remind him of his mistakes. His stepmother's words were even sharper. She watched his every move and tossed quick insults at him as if he were in her way. The air in the house was always tight, and Zevu learned to walk quietly, hoping to avoid another cold stare or harsh comment. The only person who made the place feel less painful was his grandfather Bheka. The old man's warm laugh filled the room like sunlight, and his playful teasing always brought a small smile to Zevu's face. Bheka treated him as if he mattered, as if he wasn't just an extra mouth in the house. Whenever Zevu felt the walls closing in on him, Bheka would nudge him gently or crack a silly joke until the heaviness in Zevu's chest eased a little. In a home where he often felt unwanted, Bheka was the one person who made him feel seen and safe, the only softness in a life that otherwise felt too hard for his young shoulders. As Christmas came closer, the house in Camalanga grew colder than ever, and Zevu felt it in every corner. It was the kind of cold that didn't come from weather but from people. His stepmother moved around the kitchen with a stiff face, whispering to his father behind closed doors whenever she thought he wasn't listening. At first Zevu tried to ignore it, telling himself it was nothing, but the quiet voices and sudden silence whenever he walked in made his stomach twist. He could almost feel something being planned, something he wasn't supposed to know about. Each morning at breakfast, his stepmother found new ways to make him feel small. She would slide his plate toward him with a sigh and say things like, "Don't make a mess again," or "At least try not to embarrass us today." She said it in a light tone like she was joking, but her eyes were sharp, and the words sat heavy on Zevu's heart. His father didn't defend him. He didn't even look at him. Whenever Zevu lifted his eyes, hoping to meet his father would reach for a newspaper or pretend to be busy with his phone. That quiet rejection hurt more than the insults. It made Zevu feel as if he didn't exist, as if he was fading right in front of the people who were supposed to love him. The meals became so tense that sometimes Zevu struggled to swallow. He wondered if he had done something wrong. He replayed the past week in his mind, searching for mistakes. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find a reason strong enough to explain the coldness in the house. Only one person tried to break the heaviness. Bheka, his grandfather, sat beside him at the table every morning. While the others ignored Zevu, Bheka leaned close and whispered jokes under his breath. He nudged Zevu's shoulder gently, as if reminding him he wasn't alone. When Zevu's stepmother threw a sharp comment, Bheka would wink at him, making silly faces until Zevu finally let out a small laugh. It didn't fix everything, but it soothed the tightness in his chest for a moment. Bheka's laughter felt like a warm blanket on a cold morning. Still, Zevu could see worry hiding behind his grandfather's smile. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, Bheka looked at Zevu's father with a disappointed shake of his head. Other times he sighed quietly, the kind of sigh that comes from a heart that has seen too much hurt. As the days moved closer to Christmas, the whispers in the house grew more frequent. His stepmother spoke in quick, hushed words, her tone sharp and rushed. His father's voice was low and tense. Each time Zevu walked past the door, the whispers stopped suddenly, and the silence grew even heavier. Zevu started spending more time outside or in his small room, trying not to be in the way. But even then he couldn't escape the fear building inside him. He didn't know what was coming, but he felt it growing like a storm he couldn't stop. At night, when the house was quiet, Zevu lay awake staring at the ceiling. He listened to the muffled voices of his father and stepmother arguing in the next room. He heard his name once, then a pause, then more arguing. His heart pounded. He wondered if they were planning to send him somewhere. Maybe they were tired of him. Maybe they didn't want him around for Christmas. The uncertainty ate at him until sleep finally pulled him under. Bheka noticed all of it. One evening, when Zevu sat alone outside, pretending to watch the sunset, Bheka came and sat beside him. He didn't say anything at first. He simply placed a hand on Zevu's back. Zevu didn't realize how tense he was until that moment. Suddenly, the tightness in his body loosened a little. "You're thinking too much again," Bheka said softly, eyes still on the fading sky. "Your mind is running faster than a tired horse." Zevu tried to smile, but it came out weak. "I just feel like something is wrong," he whispered. Bheka sighed and pulled Zevu closer. "Whatever happens, you'll be fine. I'm here." His voice was calm and warm, and Zevu wanted to believe him. He wanted to hold onto those words. Still, when he went to bed that night, the fear returned. Each passing day made the house colder, as if the walls themselves were holding secrets. His stepmother's jabs grew sharper. His father grew quieter. Even the air felt different, heavy and waiting. And through all of it, Bheka kept trying to lift Zevu's heart. He cracked jokes, teased him gently, tapped his shoulder, anything to make him smile. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes the sadness in Zevu's chest was too strong. The closer Christmas came, the more Zevu felt trapped between fear and hope, caught in a house where love had faded but one warm soul still fought to keep him from breaking. Little did he know, everything was about to change. On Christmas morning, Zevu woke up hoping the house would feel a little warmer, even if only for one day. He told himself maybe his father would smile at him or his stepmother would leave him alone for a while. He tried to believe Christmas could soften anyone's heart. But the moment he stepped into the living room, he knew he had been wrong. The air felt heavy, thicker than any other day, and his father was already standing there with a hard look on his face. His stepmother stood beside him with her arms crossed, her eyes sharp and full of something Zevu couldn't read. Zevu opened his mouth to wish them a quiet, Merry Christmas. But before he could finish the first word, his father's voice cut through the room. It wasn't loud at first, but it was cold. "You don't appreciate anything," he said. "Everything we do for you, and this is how you repay us." Zevu froze. His heart thumped painfully. He didn't know what his father meant. He looked at him with confusion, hoping for an explanation, but his father only grew louder. Each word felt like a slap. His stepmother stepped forward, her face twisted with fake disappointment, and kicked a small travel bag toward him. Zevu stared at it, not understanding why his belongings were packed. What is this?" he asked quietly. His voice shook. His stepmother rolled her eyes. "You know exactly what this is. We can't keep carrying dead weight." She spoke so casually, as if she were saying something normal. The words hit Zevu so hard that his breath caught in his throat. He looked at his father again, waiting, begging with his eyes for him to say this was a joke, a misunderstanding, anything. But his father didn't soften. Instead, he said, "Take your things and go, both of you." Zevu blinked. "Both," he whispered. His eyes widened as he realized what that meant. He turned around and saw Bheka standing quietly in the corner. The old man's smile was small but steady, even though his eyes looked tired. "Yes," his father said sharply. "You and that old man, we're done. There's no space for people who bring nothing." Those words cracked something deep inside Zevu. His chest tightened until it hurt. He felt the room spinning. He hadn't expected love, but he had never imagined they would throw him out. And dragging Bheka into it felt like the cruelest thing. Bheka had never hurt anyone. He was the one person who still tried to hold the family together. Zevu's stepmother pushed the bag again, harder this time. "Hurry up," she snapped. "We don't have all day." Zevu dropped to his knees without meaning to. His fingers trembled as he reached for the bag. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to fight for himself. But the words wouldn't come. His throat felt locked. Tears filled his eyes, but he tried to blink them back. He didn't want them to see him cry, not on Christmas, not like this. Then he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. Bheka crouched beside him, letting out a soft laugh that didn't match the pain in his eyes. "Come, boy," he said in a warm, teasing tone. "They think they're pushing us down, but they don't know we walk better outside anyway." His voice shook just a little, but he hid it well. Zevu looked at him, and the tears he was fighting slid down his cheeks. Bheka wiped one away with his thumb and whispered, "Don't break here. Save your strength." Bheka stood up slowly and picked up his own small bag, though Zevu knew he hadn't packed anything before. His stepmother must have done it while whispering behind doors. That thought hurt Zevu even more. They had planned this. They had talked about it for days, maybe weeks. They had waited until Christmas to do it. His father stood as if he just wanted them gone. No guilt, no hesitation, just cold eyes. Years of distance suddenly made sense to Zevu. Maybe his father had never seen him as a son. Bheka placed a steady arm around Zevu's shoulders and guided him toward the door. "Come on," he whispered. "Lift your head, you're not alone." Zevu tried, he really tried. But when he stepped outside into the harsh December sun, the brightness stung his eyes, mixing with the tears he could no longer hide. Behind them the door slammed shut, the sound sharp and final. For a moment, Zevu's knees weakened. Everything he knew had been taken away in a single morning. He didn't know where they would go or how they would survive. But Bheka held him tighter, humming a soft, old tune he used to sing when Zevu was little. The sound shook slightly, revealing the old man's own heartbreak, but he kept going. "We'll be all right," Bheka murmured. "Trust me." Zevu leaned into him, letting the warmth of that voice hold him together. And as they walked away from the house that had never truly loved them, Zevu took one last look behind him. For the first time, he didn't wish to be welcomed back. He only wished to keep walking, as long as Bheka was beside him. The moment Zevu and Bheka stepped out of the house, the hot December sun hit them like a wall. It felt strange that the world outside was bright and warm while everything inside Zevu had turned cold. He held his small bag close, his fingers trembling around the handle. Bheka walked beside him with his own tiny bag, humming an old song in a soft voice. It was the same tune he used to sing when Zevu was a child, the one that always made him feel safe. But today, the song felt different. It wavered now and then, like the old man's voice was trying to stay steady but couldn't fully hide the pain. Zevu glanced at him and saw the truth behind the smile. For a brief moment, Bheka's shoulders shook, and his face tightened with hurt. It was quick, almost invisible, but Zevu caught it. It made his heart ache even more. He hated that his grandfather had to go through this because of him. But before Zevu could speak, Bheka forced a smile back onto his face, the kind that tried to protect Zevu from breaking further. "We'll be all right, my boy," he said quietly. "Life doesn't end here." Zevu nodded even though he wasn't sure he believed it yet. His throat felt tight as they started walking. Behind them, the house door stayed shut, as if it had been waiting for years to push them out. The street was quiet, and the sun reflected off the dusty ground, making everything look blurry. Zevu didn't know if it was the heat or his tears, but he kept walking, matching Bheka's slow steps. Camalanga looked different now. The familiar houses, small shops, and narrow roads felt far away, as if he were walking through a place he had never seen before. Some people outside their homes watched the two of them pass. A few nodded at Bheka with respect, others whispered to each other, confused to see the old man carrying a bag. Zevu kept his eyes on the ground. He didn't want anyone to see how lost he felt. Every few minutes, Bheka hummed another part of the tune. The sound floated gently in the air, calming Zevu even when his chest felt tight. Bheka didn't rush. He walked as if he had all the time in the world. His calm steps helped Zevu breathe a little easier. They walked through the heart of Camalanga, past the school where Zevu had dreamed of graduating, past the old playground where he used to chase his friends, past the shops where he had bought small treats with the few coins Bheka gave him. Each place held memories, some sweet and some painful. Today they all felt distant, like pieces of a life he had already left behind. After almost an hour of walking, the houses became fewer. The paths turned rougher, and tall grass rose on both sides of the road. The sun beat down harder and sweat dripped from Zevu's forehead, but he didn't complain. He kept walking because stopping felt too dangerous. When he walked, he didn't have to think about the door that slammed behind him. Bheka pointed ahead with a small smile. "We're almost there," he said. His breathing was heavier, but his spirit was still steady. Zevu followed his gaze and saw Mabondo Hill rising quietly in the distance. It wasn't very tall, but it stood alone, covered in green patches and old trees. At the foot of the hill, half hidden behind bushes, was a tiny shack. The shack looked like it had been forgotten by time. The roof leaned slightly to one side and the wooden walls were faded and cracked. A rusted tin sheet hung near the window, tapping gently in the wind. But somehow, it felt peaceful. It didn't judge, it didn't whisper, it didn't push anyone out. "That's your place?" Zevu asked softly. Bheka nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Has been for many years," he answered. "I only visit sometimes, but today it becomes our home." They walked the last stretch quietly. When they reached the shack, Zevu paused at the door, unsure whether to feel sad or relieved. Before he could decide, Bheka placed a warm hand on his back. "This place may be small," he said, "but it has space for us. That's more than we had this morning." Zevu felt something loosen in his chest. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was a small spark of comfort. He stepped inside behind his grandfather. The air inside was dusty, carrying the smell of old wood and forgotten days. But it felt safer than the house they had left behind. It felt honest. Bheka set his bag on the floor and laughed softly, this time without any shaking in his voice. "Look at us," he said, almost teasing. "Thrown out on Christmas but still standing." Zevu looked around the little shack, then at Bheka's tired but warm face. For the first time that day, he let out a quiet, shaky laugh. Maybe life had pushed them down, but standing beside his grandfather in that forgotten shack, he realized they still had each other. And that was enough to take the next step forward. Inside the shack, the air was still and a little dusty, and the sunlight slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls in thin golden lines. Zevu placed his small bag in a corner and looked around, trying to understand how this simple, forgotten place could ever hold anything important. But Bheka moved with a quiet confidence, as if he knew something Zevu didn't. The old man walked to a corner where a small table stood under a torn cloth. He lifted the cloth and revealed a rusted metal box. The box looked old enough to crumble if touched, but Bheka handled it gently as if it carried something precious. Zevu watched with growing curiosity. He had never seen this box before. He didn't even know his grandfather kept anything here. His heart began to beat faster without him knowing why. Bheka knelt slowly, his old knees cracking softly, and pulled the box closer. He tried to open the lock, but it resisted. After a moment of fiddling, the lock clicked and the lid creaked open. Inside, instead of the useless junk Zevu had expected, there were neatly stacked documents, rolled certificates, old letters tied with string, and several shiny keys that didn't look like they belonged to a shack at all. Zevu's breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened as he leaned closer. He could see official stamps, seals, and signatures. Some documents had the names of companies printed boldly across the top. Others had maps, property lists, and financial papers that looked too important for an old shack in Mabando Hill. "Go, what is all this?" Zevu whispered, his voice barely steady. Bheka let out a soft chuckle, the kind that carried both pride and sadness. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he teased. "Come closer, boy." Zevu knelt beside him, still staring at the papers with disbelief. He picked up one file carefully, afraid he might damage it. The title made his heart jump. It belonged to a large transport company he had heard people mention in town. Another document showed ownership of farmland stretching across different provinces. Another carried the blueprint of a warehouse. It didn't make sense. How could all this belong to Bheka, the man everyone in the family treated as if he had nothing? Bheka rested a hand on Zevu's shoulder. "Let me tell you," he began softly, "many years ago, before you were born, I was abandoned by my own family. They left me with nothing but the clothes on my back." His voice grew quiet but steady. "I could have given up, I almost did, but then I realized something. If the world offered me nothing, I would build my own world." Zevu looked at him, stunned. Bheka continued, pulling out a letter and tapping it gently. "I started small," he said. "Working, saving, learning, bit by bit I built something. Not one business, not two, but many. Farms, trucks, land, storage, connections. All under my name but hidden from everyone." "Hidden? Why?" Zevu asked, almost breathless. Because not everyone deserves to know your worth, Bheka replied. Some people will only try to break what you build. I learned that the hard way. He closed the box gently. I waited for the right person, the right time. Someone who understands pain but still carries a good heart. Someone who knows how to rise after falling. Zevu stared at him, his chest tightening with a mix of shock and emotion. You mean? Yes, Bheka said with a small, proud smile. I waited for you. All this is yours to learn, to guide, to grow. You are my heir. The words hit Zevu like a wave. The boy who had been thrown out of his home that morning now sat inside a tiny shack, holding the keys to an empire he never knew existed. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. His hands shook as he touched the keys again. Bheka laughed softly at his stunned face. Breathe, my boy, he said. Life has a strange way of turning. Today you lost a home, but maybe you're gaining a world you never imagined. Zevu wiped his eyes quickly, overwhelmed. The shack felt different now. It wasn't just an old place. It was the doorway to a future he never dreamed of. And sitting beside him was the man who believed in him when no one else did. Dust rose in the small shack as Bheka pulled out more documents and spread them across the wooden floor. The sunlight caught the floating specks, making the whole room look almost magical, like something impossible was happening right in front of Zevu. He sat there with his knees pulled close, staring at pages that didn't seem real. The more Bheka revealed, the more Zevu's head spun. The old man picked up one file and smiled softly as he opened it. This, he said, tapping the paper, is the farmland in Ankani province, hundreds of hectares. I bought the first piece with the little money I had, then expanded it year by year. He placed that file down and lifted another. And these, he continued, are the transport lines. Trucks, drivers, routes that run from Camalanga to Sundani, then farther out. I built it from one second-hand truck that barely worked. He chuckled at the memory. Now there are more trucks than I can count. Zevu blinked, shocked. He had seen those big trucks on the roads before, with the same company name printed on the side, but it had never crossed his mind that they belonged to his grandfather. Bheka reached for another stack of papers tied with a faded ribbon. These are the warehouse documents, big buildings, full of goods moving in and out every day. I bought them over time, quietly, until they covered 3 provinces. Each document showed maps, owner names, and seals. And every single one of them had one thing in common: Bheka Mthembu. Zevu felt his breath catch as he realized just how much his grandfather owned. It wasn't small money. It wasn't luck. This was an empire, a real one, built piece by piece, hidden behind a gentle smile and old clothes so no one could take it away from him. Zevu pressed a hand to his mouth, trying to understand. The world he thought he knew suddenly felt tiny. All his life, people had treated Bheka like a slow, harmless old man who cracked jokes and cooked porridge. His father barely respected him. His stepmother didn't even hide her insults. They all thought Bheka was just there, taking up space. But here he was, revealing a power greater than anything they had ever touched. Zevu felt something rise in his chest, a mix of disbelief, pride, and anger. Why didn't you tell them?" he whispered. Bheka smiled calmly. "Because they never asked, and because they never cared to see beyond what was in front of them." He tapped Zevu's chest lightly. "But you always saw me. You talked to me, you listened. You made me feel like a person, not a problem." He looked away for a moment, breathing in the dusty air. "So I waited. I waited for the day you were old enough to understand what I built and strong enough to carry it." The words hit Zevu so deeply he didn't know how to respond. His vision blurred, and before he could stop himself, a shaky laugh slipped out of his mouth. It wasn't a joyful laugh, nor a sad one. It was the kind that happens when a heart is too full and doesn't know what else to do. Tears spilled from his eyes at the same time. He tried to wipe them with the back of his hand, but more kept coming. "I can't believe this," he said between uneven breaths. "They always treated you like nothing, like you were just useless." Bheka chuckled, rubbing the top of Zevu's head gently. "Let people think what they want. A tree doesn't need to explain its roots to anyone." Zevu laughed again, the sound breaking under the weight of emotion. It felt unreal that the man who had been pushed out of the house that morning, the man everyone dismissed, held more power, more land, more respect, and more success than all of them combined. He looked at his grandfather with new eyes, eyes filled with admiration, love, and a deep sense of pride. The boy who had walked out of the house feeling worthless now realized he was standing next to a giant. And in that dusty shack, surrounded by documents and truth, Zevu felt a strength he had never felt before. He wasn't just the boy they threw away. He was the heir to something incredible. And he wasn't alone. The next morning, Zevu woke up earlier than usual. He barely slept, his mind still spinning from everything he had learned. The documents, the keys, the truth about his grandfather's empire. It all felt like a dream he was scared to wake up from. But when he opened his eyes and saw Bheka already up, washing his face with cold water from a small basin, he knew it was real. Bheka gave him a gentle smile and said, "Come, boy. Today you will see the world I built." They left the shack just as the sun began painting the sky with soft colors. The road to Sundani City was long, but Bheka had arranged a car the moment he woke up. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable, and Zevu watched out the window as the scenery changed. Simple houses turned into busy streets. Dusty paths became wide roads lined with tall buildings. Sundani City looked nothing like Camalanga. Everything seemed bigger, louder, and full of life. Cars rushed by, people walked with purpose, and the city buzzed with energy. When they reached a tall glass building in the center of the city, the car stopped. Zevu stared up at it with wide eyes. It had many floors, shining windows, and a large sign near the entrance with a company name he recognized from one of the documents. This was not a small office. This was a headquarters. Bheka stepped out of the car with calm confidence, the same calmness he had shown inside the shack, but now it made sense. The moment the workers outside saw him, their faces lit up. "Chairman," one of them shouted with joy. "Good morning, Chairman," another said, rushing to open the glass doors for him. People bowed their heads slightly out of respect as he walked past. Others smiled warmly and greeted him with pride, not fear. Everyone seemed to adore him, admire him, and trust him. Zevu could only stare. He had never seen anyone show this kind of respect to his grandfather. At home, they treated him like he didn't matter. Here, he was the center of everything. Zevu walked beside him with his heart pounding. They know you," he whispered. Bheka chuckled. "Of course they do. I built this place with them." Inside the building, more workers gathered, greeting Bheka with bright eyes and happy voices. Some shook his hand. Some simply placed a hand over their chest in respect. Zevu felt like he was walking behind a king, and he couldn't stop smiling. Every new greeting made his chest grow warmer. They entered a large hall where the management team was waiting. The moment they saw Bheka, they clapped softly and stood up. The room was filled with polished tables, computers, screens, and people dressed in neat uniforms. It felt like another world. Bheka raised a hand, signaling them to sit. Then he turned to Zevu with a proud smile, the kind Zevu had never seen before. "Everyone," he said, his voice strong and warm, "this is my grandson, Zevu." Zevu felt the weight of all those eyes on him, but for once it didn't scare him. He stood a little straighter as Bheka continued. "From today," Bheka said, "he is my official heir." The room exploded with cheers. Some clapped loudly, others smiled brightly, and a few even came forward to shake Zevu's hand. Their faces held no doubt, no judgment, only support. Someone said, "Welcome, young sir," and the words hit Zevu so deeply he almost lost his breath. He tried so hard not to cry. He blinked fast, looking down for a moment, pretending to adjust his shirt, but a small tear escaped anyway. He wiped it quickly, hoping no one noticed. But Bheka did. He placed a comforting hand on Zevu's back, steady and strong. In that moment, Zevu felt something he had never felt in his father's house. He felt accepted, wanted, important. He felt like he finally belonged somewhere, not because he was useful or perfect, but because someone truly believed in him. Standing beside his grandfather, surrounded by people who respected them both, Zevu realized he was no longer the boy who had been pushed out on Christmas morning. He was stepping into a new life, a life his grandfather built, and one he would now grow into with pride. A few days later, the office was calm when a guard walked in and whispered something to Bheka. The old man raised an eyebrow, then gave a tiny smile. "Let them in," he said. Zevu stood beside him, dressed in a clean suit the staff had helped him choose. He felt nervous, but also stronger than he had ever felt before. When the doors opened, his father and stepmother walked in, their eyes wide and confused. They looked around the big office, staring at the staff, the screens, the polished floors. Then their eyes landed on Zevu. They froze. His stepmother's mouth fell open. His father's face turned pale. They had thrown him out like he was nothing, and now he stood tall beside the chairman of a huge empire. "Zevu," his father whispered, his voice shaking. We didn't know." His stepmother stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Please forgive us. We made a mistake. We didn't mean to," but Bheka let out a soft chuckle, the same warm laugh he used when calming Zevu. "A mistake," he said gently. "You threw us out without even asking why. You never cared to look deeper, and now you stand here only because you finally see what you lost." Their faces tightened with shame. Zevu watched them quietly, feeling a calm strength rise inside him. The boy who once cried in their doorway was gone. He stepped forward, shoulders straight, eyes steady. "You taught me I wasn't worth anything," he said softly, "but you were wrong." His father looked down. His stepmother wiped her eyes. Zevu didn't shout or insult them. He didn't need to. His presence, his confidence, and the life he now stood in were enough. They had thrown him away, but he had risen higher than they ever imagined.